Thank you so much for allowing me to join you in your 2020 conference. I'm extremely proud to represent 5 counties in Southeast Texas. Those great counties include Polk, Tyler, Jasper, Newton, and Hardin counties. And these counties really truly love their law enforcement and the work of our law enforcement. And I also love our law enforcement and value the work that you do throughout Texas to ensure that we have local community safety. I wanted to start off by definitely telling you that these are unique and challenging times, no doubt about it. I think hopefully hopefully by the time you get this video, um, we'll be sort of starting the recovery phase in the coastal bend. As I'm recording right now, our friends, our Texans to the south of us, are encountering Hurricane Hannah. And I'm quite obvious and sure that we've got great law enforcement officers out there working with other first responders on the front line and ensuring that those Texans are safe. Um, and for you, I pray and I have confidence that our Lord Jesus Christ is comforting your families during this period of time. We have this horrible, horrible virus called COVID 19, and it's our law enforcement officers, again, working with other first responders that are on the front lines, and you're often encountering and being exposed. And we're hoping that the resources are in your local communities where you can respond to this COVID 19 attack appropriately, and that you have the materials to do that. Now, with that, I do want to highlight a few things. One, looking at my notes here, the federal government, through the CARES Act, sent several $billions to all of the states, and Texas being a large state because the money was based on per capita. Texas got a good chunk of that. Out of that good chunk of money, billions and billions of dollars, about 11 billion was dedicated. At least 11 billion was dedicated to our local governing entities, counties, cities, and other local entities that are going through this COVID-19 response to this attack. And so I'm going to encourage you when you get back home to engage with your local officials. Every week I'm told by TDEM, Texas Department of Emergency Management, they are the agency that is oversighting the disbursement of these monies. These monies are only for local governing entities to assist them in responding to COVID-19. And so what needs to happen is our larger jurisdictions like Harris County, Dallas County, Dallas, Texas, San Antonio, larger counties, larger cities receive a direct allocation. Our more smaller jurisdictions, like all of my jurisdictions in my great House district, you had to apply to TDEM for these monies, and it's based on a per capita, per citizen in your jurisdiction. So I know in my district, many of my local jurisdictions have drawn down their allocations or began drawing down their allocations to reimburse, get reimbursement for all of the great services that you've done. Working overtime, having to buy protection, personal protection equipment, PPE, and a lot of other issues. Making sure that you have the hand sanitizer and the hygienic materials that you need in order to keep yourself safe. Our law enforcement officers are dedicated. They do a lot of great work to make sure that their fellow citizens, are safe. But if our law enforcement officers, if they're not safe, they're not healthy, it's not likely that you can translate that to us out here, needing your services, needing your support. So we're going to encourage you to inquire about those funds and encourage your local entity to draw down their allocations, because I'm being told by our friends over the Texas Department of Emergency Management, there is still a lot of money on the table, and we should not leave any of our tax money that probably should have never ended up in D.C. But now, since it's coming back, we should not leave it on the table. So, as my grandfather would say, playing dominoes, don't leave money on the table. All right, but look, I've had the opportunity to serve in the Texas legislature for 5 sessions now. That's going on 11 years. Um, I am so blessed to have the opportunity to serve my district, and I'm confident that I'll have the opportunity to return next session. Um, we, do not have any electoral competition in the primary or the general, but we're working. When the voters send that message that we're not going to take you through an electoral test, they want you to start working, and that's what we're doing. But let me just highlight some things. I just have a list of things. When I was asked to come visit with you and listen and engage with you, and pretty much what came down is that Cleet wanted me to discuss about the future of policing. We'll get into a little bit of that. I think you may have more insight about that. But I want to also talk about, in setting the stage in the future, on some of the things that we've worked with Cleet about, the Combined Law Enforcement Association of Texas. Great folks. And I have many of the members here in my district. And I just looked at all of the stuff that we have accomplished. A lot of times in politics, people like to focus on what we didn't accomplish or what we're fighting about, the conflict and what didn't get done, instead of all of the stuff that does eventually get accomplished. When I came into the legislature, we wanted to support our local law enforcement. And one of the things that we worked on, and Cleet was in the middle of this, helping us out in the legislature. And let me tell the members of Cleet, Cleet is a constructive, and valuable partner in the legislative process. And one thing they helped the legislature pass so that it was meaningful and helpful to our law enforcement officers on the front lines, on the beat per se, is body cams. Initially, some people, misinformed, thought that our law enforcement officials would not be open to the body cam technology. Intuitively, by being a former school teacher, I had the idea that you would be very receptive to the body cam technology. And let me tell you why. Because, like I said, intuitively, in my gut, and the data is proving that the body cam technology is actually protecting, and I'll just use this word kind of expeditiously here, exonerating a lot of our law enforcement officers. As I talk to my city managers throughout my district, and they talk about how citizens may come in and want to criticize or make an inquiry about the police. And one thing the city managers will do is say, well, let me go in here and look at the body cam. And right then and there, the citizen wants to say, well, that's not really necessary. I just want to say that I just think the officer could have been a little bit more nicer. So a lot of this body cam technology, now that we have a way to have some basic guidelines on how it's deployed, providing some resources for our smaller, less resource departments to get this technology, to be able to upload it, to make sure that it is a constructive piece of equipment for our law enforcement officers. We're finding out that in more than 10 times out of 10, if you can believe that can happen, I believe it can in this case, that law enforcement officers are approaching their jobs in a professional and constitutional manner. And in many instances, this body cam tapes and down, when you download the video, we find out that the suspect is actually the person that is acting or behaving poorly. It was Cleet on the front lines during that legislative session, working with one of your former law enforcement brothers and sisters, Alan Fletcher. He was chairing a committee that was looking at law enforcement and law enforcement technology and how to deploy it and get it into your hands in a constructive way. And also you were working with our Senate colleagues, in particular Senator West. And then the idea that for a period of time we had a very, very horrible incidents where our law enforcement officers were being preyed upon, they were being shot at, and people were getting their hands on these high-powered rifles and weapons, and so the idea is that we needed to beef you up with body armor to protect you. Again, we need our law enforcement officers protecting us, but first we need to give you the tools to protect yourself. And so Cleet was on the front lines, engaged in a positive, constructive manner in the legislative process and brought about the body armor. So there were monies put on the table by the legislature, again, to assist departments in getting this body armor and making sure that it's up to date. When I was talking to my law enforcement officers in my district, they were saying the shelf life, the sort of the life expectancy of the body armor. So we want to make sure that you've got the latest and the best equipment in your vehicles and on your utility belt and protecting your body. So thank you, Cleet, for helping us with that. Also, I hear a lot about this in my district. The idea of attracting the best talent, the best and brightest men and women to consider and even enter a career in law enforcement. And Cleet, again, engaging with the legislature, we were able to identify resources to help these young people who graduate from college and they want to have a life of public service in our local law enforcement departments. We want to help them pay off some of those loans that they will acquire during their college experience. So Cleet was on the front line on that. And then, even before I was in the legislature, Cleet was on the cutting edge on, being able to have departments collect the data so we can ensure that our law enforcement officers, a lot of times the idea is information is powerful. And, again, almost 10 times out of 10 of our officers are out there doing the work that we have hired them and have taken an oath to do. And we've been able to prove that because we have the data to show that, our law enforcement officers are not, out there IDing people based on race and ethnicity and so-called harassing them because of that. For a large measure, that is not happening. There are some instances where it may be, and that's why we, again, working with Cleet and other strong law enforcement agencies, we want to talk with them because, and let me say this as I go into my other issue, and it involved a piece of legislation from last session. I consider myself a defensive legislator. And what do I mean by a defensive legislator? I often study issues, engage with the stakeholders involved with those issues, and I'm trying to craft public policy to prevent or to mitigate issues in the past. So usually I'm not always trying to break new ground. I'm looking at the news, I'm engaging with stakeholders. I'm traveling throughout my district, looking at trends, looking at things on the ground, and the idea is I need to be able to protect certain stakeholders in my district. And one of those stakeholders that's very important in my district is law enforcement. I tell people in the legislature, I tell my constituents back here when they may have frustrations with law enforcement, I can go to the Capitol and I can pass all the laws that I want to, or that the constituents want me to. But here's the point. If there's no one enforcing the law, those laws don't mean a hill of beans. They're not worth the paper or the ink on the paper that those laws are written with. So we need strong law enforcement. And here's another thing about law enforcement that I have to remind folks. Law enforcement is that executive branch function. You know, we have three branches of government, regardless if it's federal, state, county, local. We have this concept of three branches of government. The legislature, which I am proud to belong to, the judicial branch, where we have great legal scholars as judges, and then we have the executive branch, where you have agencies and great law enforcement officers like yourself that enforce the law, that give life to the law. That's the enforcement. And we need good law enforcement to do that. So last session, after much study, going into last session, it's the idea that we want to give our citizens the confidence that our law enforcement officers, when they have to detain and deprive someone of their liberty, it's primarily due to the fact that that person is a danger to that officer and in general to public safety. So we did work with CLEAT, and CLEAT comes to my office regularly, and we're grateful for that because we learn a lot when Chris and other parts of that legislative team come into our office. And there was a piece of legislation that was really modeled after a lot of current police policies, that when we have these non-jailable offenses, better known as Class C misdemeanors by some folks, that the only time when we would have to deprive someone of their liberty, consider an arrest and a detention, is when even with that Class C misdemeanor, they are a threat to public safety, or they've been a future threat to public safety because they have warrants, outstanding warrants, or maybe even an outstanding a parole blue warrant. We want our officers getting those people off the street, getting them detained because they're a threat to our life and our property. And CLEAT was on the front line on helping us get something to the floor that was amenable and constructive and practical. And it was actually voted off the floor. I'll say that again. It was actually voted off the House floor in an overwhelming majority, heading over to the Senate. And because of some folks wanting to get greedy and wanting to, make the bill a Christmas tree, the bill did not eventually get over to the Senate. So don't listen to the political hacks out there that really want to undermine the great work of CLEAT and really want to undermine law enforcement. And let me get into that real quick as I finish my remarks on the role of law enforcement in the future. I think really what we need to first decide, those of us in the society, and police officers, you are in the society. I think first what we need to understand, what we need to not just understand, we need to come to grips with is, what type of society do we want? Do we want a society like what we're seeing in Portland right now? 58 days of unrest. Not 58 days of peaceable protest by law-abiding, well-meaning citizens exercising their constitutional rights to want to impact and change their government. We're talking about 58 days of riots, mayhem, burning. That's not America. That's not America. And is that the society we want? In general, we're going to have to ask ourselves that as Americans and Texans. Is that what we want? Before we can even address the future of law enforcement, we need to address what is the future climate. What is the future as far as law and order? And I am for law and order, and I'm supporting our president on that. I am for constitutional laws and rightful order. If you don't have law and order, law and order goes together. If you have no order, if you have no law, you have no order. And the only way you're going to maintain the law is by having order. Okay? So, folks bristle at the idea about demanding law and order. Communities want law and order. And then just to throw this out, I saw a poll the other day, and 56% of American blacks want law and order. They do not want to defund their police. And that's in line with how this polls with other demographics in our country and throughout our state. We don't want to defund police, and let me tell you why we don't want to defund police. And look, as a legislator that appropriates money, I know what it means to say, hey, we're going to spend a little bit more over here and a little bit less over here. That's the job of a legislator. That's the job of someone who appropriates money in a governing body. We know what that is about. Okay. But that is not what the supporters of defund the police are talking about. Defund the police. Let me put it on the table. It's leftist orthodoxy. Okay, it's about changing the narrative, changing the fabric of our society upside down. That's what that's about. We can't defund the police. We can't defund marginalized law and order. And we have to also remember this. The police, the law enforcement, they're our brothers and sisters. They're our uncles and aunts. They're our fathers and mothers. These are what these people are. Law enforcement isn't just a group of folks that just arrived, from another planet to do law enforcement, and they just fell out of outer space. These are people that are in our families. And no, we cannot defund them. What we should do is we should fund them appropriately to do the work that we want them to do, and that is to maintain local community safety. So as I close here on the future of policing, this is what I think the future of policing is, and I believe CLEAT, the rank and file of CLEAT, share this with me. The future of policing is that we continue to make sure that our police are well trained and well equipped going into the future. They have access to all of the 21st century technology and information to make sure that they maintain their personal safety while they're maintaining our safety. The future of policing going into the 21st century, where those of us as citizens, the civilians, that we value security, we value civil society, and we're locking arms with our law enforcement to achieve those aims. The future of policing. I think when we look at the future of policing, we're attracting the best and brightest. We are recognizing that law enforcement is a calling, and it's not the last place for people to settle. It's a calling where people desire to want to go into law enforcement. The future of policing, that it's this valuable profession that we uphold in our community. One thing about my part of East Texas is that we love our law enforcement officers. We love our correctional officers. We love our school resource officers. We love our officers in our various police departments and our sheriff's departments and those that work on the state and federal level. We understand that these folks actually are there for us. And here's another great thing about law enforcement. As we think about the future of policing, it is one of those few government activities, core government services. It is a core government service. We expect that when we call 911 and we're in trouble, you will show up, and you do. But it is one of the few government activities that people truly see their tax dollars working. So as we go into this, as we go into the future, I just really hope that those of us that are not the law enforcement civilians, we understand that our law enforcement officers see so many things that are so they can be so damaging to your mental psyche. We need to make sure that we're giving our law enforcement officers the mental health support that they need. Oftentimes, when I'm sitting down talking to law enforcement officers, you are the first ones that are really making that CPS call. You're arriving at a home where a child is endangered in a very bad situation, and you're the first one making that call. So I'm looking forward to the 87th legislature. I'm looking forward to working with CLEAT. I know the past few months has been very, very hard on a lot of our police officers, because our police officers are the men and women that we sit next to in our church. And there have been events that have happened that have tried to tarnish and undermine your credibility. But you need to know this here. The people of Texas, the people in House District 19, and this particular state legislator, we're going to stand with you. We don't mind making reforms in police. We don't mind having criminal justice reform. But we're not going to allow the zeitgeist of the day to be a run on the credibility and the work of police officers. We're going to tackle these issues in a constructive manner. We're going to tackle them in a positive manner. We're going to give you the discretion that you need under the Constitution of this state and this country to do the work that we require, and that is to have law and order in a civil society. Hillister, Texas, Hardin County, House District 19, the state of Texas is not Portland. It's not Chicago. The reason why we've been able to do so much in criminal justice reform, lowering our incarceration rates, while at the same time not seeing spikes in crime throughout the state, is because of the work that you're doing on the front lines. And we're going to continue to value that, and we're going to continue to give you the resources to do that, and we're not going to get caught up in all of these little silly games about defunding the police. Thank you for this opportunity to address you. Thank you for this opportunity to engage you. I look forward to the 87th legislature, again, working with CLEAT and working with all of our law enforcement officers in order to maintain safe communities. May God bless you, and through you, God will continue to bless the great state of Texas.